Space is the final frontier, beautiful, vast, and utterly merciless. It's a place where a single mistake, a tiny malfunction, or even a stray piece of debris can mean instant death. These are not just accidents. They're moments frozen in time where bravery collided with catastrophe. From capsules that turned into coffins to missions that burned up before they ever reached home, here are 5 of the most terrifying space deaths ever recorded.
At the height of the Cold War, 2 superpowers would vie to put their man on the moon. Yet before one small step for man, one giant leap in spaceflight would have to come first.
It was April 22, 1967. The pale dawn light spread across the Baikonur Cosmodrome as Vladimir Komarov, husband, father, and national hero, walked slowly toward the launch pad of Soyuz 1. Every step echoed like a heartbeat. He knew this might be his last walk. Behind the proud smiles and patriotic speeches, he carried a terrible secret. The spacecraft he was about to pilot was fatally flawed. Komarov, 40 years old, was already a Soviet icon, a test pilot and cosmonaut who had flown on Voskhod 1, the first mission to carry more than one human into space. But this flight was different. He wasn't chasing glory. He was walking into a machine he knew could kill him. His closest friend, Yuri Gagarin, had begged the Kremlin to cancel the launch. Engineers had found over 200 major defects: faulty parachutes, unstable controls, unreliable sensors, and a heat shield that might rip off during re-entry. The warnings were ignored. The launch was politically timed for Lenin's birthday and May Day celebrations. Komarov faced an impossible choice. If he refused, Gagarin, his backup, would have to fly. He couldn't let his friend die in a doomed spacecraft, so he accepted the mission in silence, smiling for cameras as he stepped into Soyuz 1, knowing it was a coffin. At 3:35 a.m., the rocket roared to life. Within minutes, disaster struck. One of the 2 solar panels failed to deploy, crippling power and control. Komarov fought to stabilize the tumbling ship, burning precious fuel as ground control scrambled to save him. The planned launch of Soyuz 2 was canceled immediately. For 18 orbits, Komarov battled the failing spacecraft. His calm voice masked the chaos. Conditions are poor. Eventually, Mission Control ordered an emergency return. The capsule entered Earth's atmosphere engulfed in fire. The heat shield held, but the parachutes did not. The main chute failed to open, and the backup tangled with it. There would be no slowing down. Soviet listening posts recorded Komarov's final words filled with rage and despair as he cursed the officials who had sent him to his death. At 7:24 a.m., Soyuz 1 slammed into the steppe near Orenburg at over 250 mm, flattening on impact and erupting into flames. His remains fused with the wreckage unrecognizable, beyond recovery. Komarov became the first human to die during spaceflight. The Soviet Union hid the truth, but among his fellow cosmonauts, outrage spread. Gagarin and others demanded accountability for a tragedy caused not by space itself, but by politics and pride. Soyuz flights were grounded for 18 months, and hundreds of flaws were corrected, the same ones Komarov had warned about. His sacrifice forced a reckoning within the Soviet space program. Vladimir Komarov didn't die because space is dangerous. He died because politics made it deadly. His final flight remains a haunting reminder of courage, friendship, and the deadly price of ambition.
The people of the Soviet Union were keen to welcome them back to Earth. But when their capsule touched down and the recovery team knocked on the door, they received no response.
It was June 6, 1971. A quiet night on the Kazakh steppe, but at the Baikonur Cosmodrome, history was preparing to roar to life once again. 3 Soviet cosmonauts, Georgy Dobrovolsky, Vladislav Volkov, and Viktor Patsayev, climbed into their Soyuz 11 capsule, unaware they were stepping into one of the most haunting tragedies in the history of space exploration. They were national heroes, chosen to represent the Soviet Union's new frontier, Salyut 1, the world's first space station. Their mission to live and work in orbit for 3 weeks was meant to prove that humans could survive long-term in space. The launch was flawless. Within a day, Soyuz 11 docked with Salyut 1, and for the first time in history, humans entered a functioning space station. For 22 days, the crew lived hundreds of kilometers above Earth, conducting experiments, broadcasting to millions, and setting endurance records. But small problems began to surface: smoke in the air filters, a brief electrical fire, and communication static. Still, they stayed calm and completed the mission. By June 29th, their work was done. They sealed the station, undocked, and began their return to Earth. Every system checked out, their voices steady and confident. Then, suddenly, radio silence. The capsule re-entered the atmosphere smoothly. Parachutes deployed, and at 2:17 a.m. on June 30th, it landed softly in Kazakhstan. Ground crews rushed to greet the heroes, but when they opened the hatch, their smiles vanished. All three cosmonauts sat motionless, their faces blue, blood at their noses and ears. There was no fire, no crash, just silence. They had suffocated in space. The investigation uncovered a horrifying truth. A tiny pressure valve, damaged during separation, had opened too early, venting the cabin into the vacuum of space. Within 15 seconds, the pressure dropped to zero. Viktor Patsayev, seated closest to the valve, had tried to close it, but he never stood a chance. In under a minute, all three were dead. Doctors later discovered that their blood had foamed and capillaries had burst, the unmistakable signs of rapid decompression. They had become the only humans to die in space itself. The Soviet Union declared the mission a success and honored them with heroes' funerals in Red Square, their ashes laid beside Yuri Gagarin. The truth of their deaths was hidden for years, while engineers quietly redesigned the Soyuz to carry only 2 cosmonauts, allowing for pressure suits during launch and landing. When rescuers first opened the capsule, one whispered, "Dobrovolsky is still warm." They tried to revive him, but the void had already claimed them all. Even today, craters on the moon bear their names: Dobrovolsky, Volkov, and Patsayev, 3 men who reached higher than anyone before them and proved a chilling truth. In space, it's not the vastness that kills you, but the smallest, simplest things.
1 minute 15 seconds. Velocity 2,900 feet per second. Altitude 9 nautical miles. Downrange distance 7 nautical miles.
It was the morning of January 28, 1986. A biting chill clung to the air at Kennedy Space Center as the Space Shuttle Challenger stood poised on Launch Pad 39B, gleaming white against a flawless blue sky. To the thousands gathered below, and the millions watching live on television, it was a moment of hope, pride, and wonder. But to a handful of engineers watching from afar, it was a ticking time bomb. Inside the shuttle sat 7 astronauts, ordinary people made extraordinary by courage. Commander Francis Dick Scobie, pilot Michael Smith, mission specialists Judith Resnick, Ronald McNair, and Ellison Onizuka, payload specialist Gregory Jarvis, and Krista McAuliffe, a high school teacher from New Hampshire. She was to be the first civilian in space, the face of NASA's new Teacher in Space program. For once, space didn't just belong to scientists, it belonged to the classroom, to every kid watching at home. But beneath the excitement, there was unease. The night before, the temperature had plunged to 18 degrees, the coldest weather ever for a shuttle launch. Engineers at Morton Thiokol, the company responsible for the shuttle's solid rocket boosters, were terrified. They warned NASA that the O-ring seal's rubber rings meant to contain searing hot gas inside the boosters might become too brittle to work in such cold. If they failed, those gases could escape and burn straight through the rocket. 2 engineers, Roger Boisjoli and Alan McDonald, pleaded to delay the launch. They argued, shouted, even begged, but NASA managers were under immense political pressure. The launch had already been delayed several times, and the media mocked the agency for hesitating. Executives wanted success, not caution, and in the end, the engineers were overruled. At 11:38 a.m., Challenger's engines ignited. The ground trembled. The shuttle rose majestically into the sky, trailing white fire and hope. McAuliffe's students cheered in classrooms across America. The families waved proudly. For 59 seconds, everything seemed perfect. Then, a small tongue of orange flame appeared on the side of the right booster, invisible to the naked eye, but captured by high-speed cameras. It flickered at first, then grew as hot gases burned through the metal casing and scorched the external fuel tank. The O-ring had failed exactly as the engineers predicted. At 72 seconds into flight, Challenger was 48,000 feet high, moving at nearly twice the speed of sound. The flame sliced through a support strut holding the booster in place. The external tank ruptured, releasing a storm of liquid hydrogen and oxygen, a deadly mix that ignited in an instant. At 11:39:13 a.m., a white bloom of fire spread across the sky. The crowd gasped, then screamed. Pieces of the shuttle spiraled outward, the boosters tumbling wildly, the orbiter vanishing into the explosion. But the truth came later. The crew wasn't killed instantly. The crew cabin had survived the explosion intact, hurtling through the sky on a doomed arc. Inside, the astronauts were conscious, oxygen systems automatically activated. One of the last recorded transmissions came from pilot Michael Smith, his calm voice breaking the silence with 2 words, "I-O." For 2 minutes and 45 seconds, the cabin plummeted toward the Atlantic. Over 12 miles, no control, no parachutes, just gravity and silence. Investigators later determined that at least 3 of the astronauts had manually activated their emergency air packs. That means for part of that fall, they were awake. They knew. The cabin hit the ocean at over 200 miles per hour, 18 miles off the coast of Florida. The impact shattered everything. Rescue teams arrived quickly, but there were no survivors. NASA went silent. America was in shock. Schools turned off their televisions. Reporters struggled for words. That night, President Ronald Reagan addressed the nation. The future doesn't belong to the faint-hearted. It belongs to the brave. For 32 months, NASA grounded the shuttle program. A presidential inquiry the Rogers Commission found the cause, the O-ring failure, triggered by cold, ignored warnings, and a culture of silence. The design of the solid rocket boosters was completely overhauled, with new seals and heaters to prevent another catastrophe. When divers recovered the wreckage, they found the crew cabin buried on the ocean floor. The evidence told a story of humans who did everything right and a system that failed them. They found 3 air packs manually switched on, proof of defiance even in death. Challenger was supposed to be a celebration, a symbol that space belonged to everyone. Instead, it became a monument to tragedy and a reminder of what happens when ambition outruns caution. The teacher in space never got to teach her lesson, but the world learned one instead, written in fire across the Florida sky.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Peter Jennings at ABC News headquarters. In the words of a flight director at NASA, it has been a bad day. 7 astronauts have died, their families shattered. The space program has been dealt a terrible blow. The larger family of men and women in space exploration devastated.
On January 16, 2003, Space Shuttle Columbia lifted off from the Kennedy Space Center for a 16-day science mission called STS-107. The crew of 7 astronauts included Commander Rick Husband, pilot William McCool, mission specialists Kalpana Chawla, David Brown, Laurel Clark, Michael Anderson, and Israeli payload specialist Ilan Ramon. Their mission focused on conducting over 80 experiments in various scientific fields. During launch, a large piece of foam insulation broke off from the external fuel tank and struck Columbia's left wing. This happened just 81 seconds after liftoff, when the shuttle was traveling at over 1,500 mph. The impact created a small hole in the wing's thermal protection system, a damage that would prove fatal during re-entry. Engineers noticed the foam strike, but believed it was not a serious problem since similar incidents had happened before without causing disasters. NASA engineers requested high-resolution images from military satellites to inspect the wing, but mission managers denied the request. They reasoned that even if there was damage, nothing could be done to fix it while in orbit. The crew, unaware of the danger, carried out their experiments and maintained cheerful communication with mission control throughout the mission. On February 1, 2003, Columbia began its return to Earth. As it entered the atmosphere over the Pacific Ocean, hot plasma entered through the hole in the left wing. Temperatures rose above 2,500 degrees, melting the aluminum structure inside. The sensors on the left wing began failing rapidly. At 8:59 a.m. EST, while the shuttle was 200,000 feet above Texas, Columbia's left wing tore away from the fuselage. Within seconds, the shuttle disintegrated, scattering debris across Texas and Louisiana. All 7 astronauts lost their lives instantly. The tragedy shocked the world. It was the second major disaster in the history of the NASA's Space Shuttle program, after the Challenger explosion in 1986. NASA suspended all shuttle flights for over 2 years to investigate and improve safety. Investigators found that the foam strike had been underestimated, and communication failures between engineers and management played a major role in the tragedy. In response, NASA made major changes to shuttle operations. Future missions included detailed inspections of the shuttle's heat shield while in orbit and procedures for on-orbit repairs. NASA also developed rescue plans for crews in case of serious damage. When flights resumed in 2005, new safety rules required that all missions go to the International Space Station so that astronauts could seek refuge if needed. The Columbia disaster marked the beginning of the end for the shuttle era, leading to the retirement of the fleet in 2011. The bravery of the STS-107 crew and the lessons learned from their loss continue to influence space safety and engineering standards today. It was November 15th, 1967 morning over the Mojave Desert. On the runway at Edwards Air Force Base, a sleek black aircraft sat beneath the wing of a massive B-52 bomber. Inside its cockpit was 37-year-old Major Michael J. Adams, a test pilot, an engineer, and a man who had spent his life chasing the edge of the impossible. Adams wasn't just another pilot. He was one of the best veterans of the U.S. Air Force, a man being quietly considered for NASA's astronaut corps. He had already flown 6 missions in the legendary X-15, a rocket-powered aircraft built to explore where the atmosphere ended and space began. This would be his 7th flight, 365-97, a test meant to reach an altitude of 250,000 feet, more than 47 miles above the Earth. It was a routine mission by X-15 standards, but everyone in the program knew routine was a dangerous word. At exactly 10:30 a.m., the B-52 released the X-15 from 45,000 feet over Delamar Dry Lake. The moment Adams hit the ignition, the rocket came alive. 57,000 pounds of thrust blasted him forward, pressing him into his seat as the aircraft roared upward. In seconds, the desert fell away beneath him. The sky darkened from blue to indigo to black. He was riding a controlled explosion into space. Everything looked perfect. The X-15 climbed steeply and cleanly through the atmosphere. Instruments stable, engine burning bright. Within minutes, Adams reached an altitude of 266,000 feet, officially entering space. He became one of the few humans in history to see Earth curve below him, glowing blue and white beneath an infinite black sky. But up there, above the breathable world, something subtle began to go wrong. The X-15 started to drift. In the near vacuum of space, there was no wind resistance, no feeling in the controls to warn him. The aircraft was quietly twisting off course, and Adams didn't realize it yet. The reaction control system wasn't responding properly. Down on the ground, engineers at Edwards tracked his flight path, unaware of the silent instability building above. Adams began his descent, but the yaw became worse. The X-15 started to spin. Not a gentle rotation, but a violent, tumbling motion, the kind that even the most skilled pilot can't easily stop. He fought the controls, tried to steady her. His voice came over the radio, strained but calm. "I'm in a spin." Mission Control couldn't see his true orientation. The data was patchy, the plasma around the aircraft blocking signals. They told him to stay steady, to work through it. But there was no spin recovery procedure for a rocket plane moving faster than Mach 5. Adams was now falling back into the atmosphere, sideways, spinning end over end at over 3,000 miles per hour. As he re-entered thicker air, aerodynamic forces slammed into the X-15. The aircraft's angle of attack was so extreme that it was flying almost broadside into the air. The G-forces mounted 5 Gs, 10 Gs, 15 Gs. Adams struggled to correct, but at that speed, even the smallest movement could send the craft into chaos. The black horizon spun wildly in front of him. At 65,000 feet, traveling at Mach 3.9, the X-15 reached its breaking point. The stress on the airframe was beyond anything human or machine could bear. The aircraft began to tear itself apart, wings shearing off, fragments scattering across the desert sky. In his final moments, Adams likely lost consciousness. Seconds later, the X-15 disintegrated in a flash of fire and metal. Debris rained down over the barren desert near Johannesburg, California. The main wreckage carved a deep crater into the sand. Rescue teams rushed to the site and found Adams's body still strapped into his seat. The ejection system had never fired. It was over in less than 11 minutes. They found that he had done everything right, every move logical, every effort heroic. But at those speeds, at those altitudes, a single misreading could turn triumph into tragedy. The loss of Michael Adams sent shockwaves through the spaceflight community. NASA and the Air Force convened an accident board, searching for answers in the twisted wreckage. His cockpit camera was found smashed, but after days of searching, engineers recovered the tiny film cartridge that revealed his final seconds, a man calmly working the controls until the end. The board made crucial changes after his death: new ground-based attitude indicators, better pilot training for disorientation, and tighter safeguards on flight control systems. From that day forward, mission controllers could see exactly what their pilots saw: pitch, roll, yaw, heading in real time. It was a lesson written in blood and sky. Major Michael J. Adams was posthumously awarded astronaut wings, making him the first person to earn them by dying in space. His name is carved into the Space Mirror Memorial in Florida, alongside others who gave their lives pushing the boundaries of human flight.